Welcome to Presenting Data with Excel. Today you're going to have a self-paced tutorial that will teach you a little bit about how to present data and make graphs and charts using Excel. Remember that if at any point you get lost or you need to pause the video, you should just be able to click on the video or rewind it. I'm going to move fairly quickly because some people might know some of these techniques, and so that'll allow them to go a little more quickly. But if you need to pause and rewind, please do so that you're getting the most out of this experience as well. The first thing you're going to need to do is to navigate to the T drive. In staff information, in the in-service folder, in the January in-services, in Excel, there is a file called sample data 2. If you open that data, you'll probably receive a message like this that says it's read only. Go ahead and click the read only button, and then we're going to do a file save as, and we're going to save this Excel workbook to somewhere on our H drive so that we can access it and make the changes that we need later on. So now that we have the file, our overall goal is we're going to make our file look, I have a sample here for you, to look a little bit like this. We're going to do a couple of formatting options. We're going to do some highlighting. There's going to be a couple of formulas involved. We're going to try to extend you just a little beyond what your last session taught you, which was some of the basic formatting. So what we'd like to start off with is what I like to do before I start doing a lot of data manipulation is to make a copy, create a copy of the sheet that I'm using, and I'm going to just move it to the end so that if I make a mistake and I don't like what I've done, I can always delete the sheet completely and move back to the original data and not having lost anything. So in this data, what we represent is a number of fake students with their student ID number, what grade they're in, what their WKCE score was, what their that's their proficiency. This is their scale score and their 2010 scale score. And we're going to make a column called difference. So I've put a heading on there for you already just to show you that that's one of the things we're going to do. Now, I don't like how tight this is. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight the entire sheet and double click so that it spans this out a little bit. The next thing that I'd like to do is some of these headings are really long considering that the data is not very small. So I'm just going to highlight row number 1 and I'm going to click on wrap text. And now I'm going to try to recreate this. I'm going to highlight the whole sheet again, and I'm going to make all the columns this big. You can see that some of the number labels have disappeared, so I'm going to make that a little bit bigger so that we can see how much it is, and then go back and double click it so that it isn't too big for me. So that way I have things nicely spaced, and I can keep double clicking on any one of these to find out, to get them exactly the difference that I want, and tighten the data up. Now the other thing that I don't really like is that these numbers are a little off balance, so I like to center a lot of those things. So I'm just going to highlight all of the columns and center all of that information. Now you'll notice that my last name is not in order, so we're going to sort this. So if I click in the first box on last name and I come up here to where it says sort and filter and click the little arrow, I can sort from A to Z. and that will put all of my names alphabetically from A to Z. Now, some people like to highlight all of the information that they're going to sort and then do a sort. As long as you don't have a lot of gaps in your data, you don't really need to do it that way. You can just be in the column that you want and click sort. So the next thing that I would like to do is it's a little bit easier sometimes to have grid lines when you're reading. So I'm going to highlight, and I'm going to leave myself an extra row because there's something that I'm going to do. I like to highlight my data and then put my grid lines in, and I'm going to put all borders. And I like to highlight it because I don't necessarily like to show grid lines everywhere else. We could have just highlighted the whole field and then hit grid lines, and it would have grid lined everything. I don't really like to do all of that, so I really like to just highlight the data that I want gridded and then put that in. So as you can probably guess, the difference column, I'm going to find out how much did they grow from 2010 to 2011 in their math scale score. So we're going to set up a formula. So the first thing you do is type equal. And then if I type the first number that I want, so this one, I can either type in the letters F2, or I can just click the box, and then minus, and then I'm going to click the box again, G2, and we'll get a subtraction of 40. And I can see right now that I'm not centered in this column, so I'm going to go back and center it up here. And then what I'd like to do is I would like to just copy this to the rest of the sheet all the way down. So I'm going to take the bottom right hand corner and left click on that and pull it all the way down to the bottom of the sheet, or to the last number, and you can see all of the differences. Now notice that Bryson here didn't take one of the tests, and so his score was 416. What I'd like to do for myself is I'm going to go up here and highlight this in red to show me that, well, wait, there's a problem here, there's an error with the data. And then I'm going to take this one here and I'm going to delete it, just because I don't really want him to be included in that process. And so I've taken him out, and the reason that I've taken him out is because what I'm going to do is I actually want to find out what is the average amount of growth, so how many scale score growth did the average student make in my classroom. So I just put the average in. I'm going to highlight this entire bottom row in yellow just to make the average stand out a little bit more. And then what I'm going to do is I want to do the average here. So I need a formula for this. Luckily, there is a formula already built in for average. If you go up here to auto sum, you can do the average. But it's only counting these couple because there's a gap here. But I really wanted it to count the whole category. So if I left click in the corner where it's got the little little extended line here, and I scroll all the way up to the top, I now have the average. If I hit enter, it gives me the number. But I also didn't really like that many decimal points. So if I go up here to the number and I click get rid of some decimal points, it will continue to round it to the number of decimal points that I like. And I wanted a whole number because all of these were whole numbers. So I have the average student grew 28 points. Now, we could get a little bit fancier than that. So, yes, the average student grew 28 points, but how does that compare? I've got this big long list of numbers, and I want to find a nice, easy way to identify whether or not this first student, Dylan, grew more than the average amount of growth in the class. So we're going to do something that will probably be the most complicated part of all of the day. We're going to do something called conditional formatting. And a conditional format is basically do this if this condition is met. And so we're going to set up a conditional format, and we're going to make a new rule. In the new rule, we're going to use a formula to determine which cells to format. And I need to scroll this out of the way because I need to be able to see. So what my formula is going to be is equals. I want this space right here, this H2, I want that to be greater than, and now I need to figure out, well, what was my number down here? H30. If that works, it's going to do something, and I'm going to set a format for what it should do. So if I click on the format button, I want it to fill in green, because green is good. Beat the average, and click OK. Now, here's the trickiest part of this whole piece. If we copy this formula, it's going to change some of these numbers. If I always want H17, H19, H23, if I always want it to compare to the H30 cell, if I put $signs in front of them, in front of the H and in front of the 30, the $signs say, you know what? Always compare whatever number is in here to H30. It will always stay the same. So I'm going to click OK. If I scroll back up, hey, it changed to green because the average was 28 and our number is 40. Now if I take this number and I pull it all the way down to the one that's just before, so I've copied that down. Remember, that's a left click and pull that right corner down, the bottom right corner. Now, how come 40 changed? Well, remember this one that didn't have data? It put 416 back in there because we copied the formula all the way through, but you know what? We didn't really want that. And this is the coolest thing about Excel, is if I just delete that, you can see, I'm going to do that again. So it was in there. Right now the average growth is 42 because that 416 pulled the average way up. If I delete that out, oh, my average went back to 28 and all of the green spaces changed again. So now we have alphabetized, we've resized, we've put grid lines in, we did some wrapping our text. We did two different kinds of formulas, one simple subtraction, an average, and we did a conditional formatting, and we did some filling of some documents here as well. You have just learned a whole lot of Excel tips and techniques. You can take that page and send it to the printer. You shouldn't have to select the document and just print the selection because we don't have anything out here that makes it bigger. So if you just print it to your closest printer, you should be able to get this all right, and your principal will tell you whether you got the right average and whether it all worked out the way you wanted it to. Hopefully you learned a whole bunch. Thanks for the time, and we'll see you in the next session of making graphs.